Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laiq Siddiqui, the father of HOLOPHASE. Part 24. One permission, one world. There is one primitive, the holophase, the continuous cyclic order that makes reality readable. In part 23, we earned the line drawn in bedrock. Without phi, no world. Not because the universe needs stuff, but because a world needs distinguishability. If nothing can be told apart, nothing can be called a world at all. It's just fog, white noise. Darkness so complete, even the factory ceases to exist. That was necessity. Now we take the next logical step. If phi is necessary for any reality, then how many phis make a reality? Is the universe built from many comparabilities? Does each mind, each particle, each dimension have its own private permission to distinguish? Or is there only one? This is part 24. The core insight is simple, but its implications run deep. A coherent, consistent reality has exactly one comparability structure. One phi per universe. Not many. One. Let me say it again in the simplest words possible. One world can't have two different rules for what counts as same and different. Not at the foundation. If it did, the world would either split, contradict, or become unreadable. So our memory hook is clean. One coherent world, one comparability structure. The two watches that tell one time. Let's start with something you know in your bones. You have two watches. Not just similar watches, identical watches. You set them to the same second. You synchronize them perfectly. They tick in unison. They show the same hour, same minute, same second. They never disagree, never drift apart. Now ask yourself honestly, do you have two time-telling systems? Or do you have one time-telling system displayed in two places? Functionally, they are one. If you look at one watch, you know what the other says. There is no different time between them. No comparison yields a difference. Yes, they are two physical objects, two separate mechanisms. But as time tellers, they are not separate. They give the same readout. They serve the same function. They provide the same information. If one breaks, the other continues telling the same time. You haven't lost half of time telling. You've lost redundancy. Now push this further. What if the watches weren't just synchronized, but were quantum entangled in such a way that they could never show different times? What if any attempt to make one show 3 o'clock while the other showed 4 o'clock was physically impossible? Then you wouldn't have two independent time sources. You'd have one time source manifesting in two locations. The two-ness becomes superficial. The oneness is in the comparability structure itself. That's our first clue. Not whether there are multiple physical instances, but whether there are multiple independent ways to compare. The twins who share one mind. Let's go deeper into human experience. Imagine identical twins. Not just siblings who look alike, twins who finish each other's sentences, who feel each other's pain, who never contradict, never disagree, never have separate memories. One says, I remember our 5th birthday. The other says, the cake was chocolate. Not because they discussed it, because they share the memory. Are they two people? Or one consciousness in two bodies? The law might say two persons. Biology might say two organisms. But experience might whisper one being. The point isn't to solve the philosophy of identity. The point is this. Their complete indistinguishability in thought, memory, and perception makes the count ambiguous. If everything one knows, the other knows in exactly the same way. If every comparison one makes, the other makes identically, then do they have two comparability structures? Or do they share one? Now imagine this unity wasn't psychological. Imagine it was logical. Imagine that any distinction one could make, the other would necessarily make in the same way, at the same time, with the same result. Then the two-ness becomes a linguistic convenience. The comparability, the phi, is singular. This is not metaphysics. It's strict accounting. Counting requires distinction. If there's no trackable difference, two becomes a shaky word. The factory's single pattern. I return to the weaving factory beneath hell. Imagine two carpets, not just similar carpets, perfectly identical carpets, thread by thread, knot by knot, color by color, pattern by pattern. They come from the same design, woven by the same hands, finished at the same time. Now, are they two carpets, or one carpet pattern manifested twice? As physical objects, yes, they occupy different space. You can put one here, one there. You can sell them separately. But as designs, as patterns, as meaningful arrangements, they are the same. The master weaver looks at them and says, "This is the Herati pattern." He doesn't say, "This is Herati A and that is Herati B." He says, "This is the Herati." The pattern is one. Its instances are many. Now push further, beyond physical carpets. Imagine two weavers working from the same mental pattern. Not just similar ideas, the exact same mental image, the same understanding of every knot, every color transition, every border. When the first weaver thinks, "Next comes the blue knot," the second simultaneously thinks, "Next comes the blue knot." Do they have two separate pattern understandings? Or do they share one pattern that both access? If their understanding is truly identical, if every comparison they make about the pattern yields the same result, then the comparability structure of the pattern is one. This isn't about brain states or neurons. It's about the readability of the design. One readable pattern, many instances of reading it. Phi is to a world what the pattern is to the carpet. You can have many instantiations, many views, many local expressions, but one pattern of comparability holding the whole thing together. If you claim there are two patterns governing the same carpet, what would that mean? It would mean that in one part of the carpet, this matches means one thing, and in another part, this matches means something else, in a way that cannot be reconciled. But then the carpet has no unified design. It becomes a collage of incompatible rules. And then it is not one coherent design. It is multiple designs stitched together with no common standard. And if there is no common standard, there is no way to say stitched together coherently either, because together is a comparative relation. So again, the same conclusion appears. One coherent world implies one phi. The bread that cannot be baked. Let me give you an even simpler example, one that touches survival. You and I are baking bread. We have two measuring cups. One is marked in milliliters, one is marked in cups. We can use either. Are there two measurement systems? Yes. Are there two realities of flour? No. There is one flour reality. And because there is one flour reality, there is a conversion. 1 cup equals about 240 milliliters. The existence of that conversion, that reliable relationship, is exactly what one coherent world means. Different encodings, one underlying comparability. Now, imagine the nightmare scenario. A world where sometimes one cup equals 240 milliliters, and sometimes it equals 50, and sometimes it equals 900. No rule, no pattern, no stability, no possibility to learn it. Could you bake bread? No, because the world would not be coherent enough for repeated comparison. Truth would not survive tests. Objectivity would collapse. Responsibility would collapse. This shows you something crucial. The uniqueness of phi is not a metaphysical luxury. It is what makes stable practice possible, what makes learning possible, what makes correction possible, what makes civilization possible. Without one shared comparability structure, every recipe becomes guesswork. Every promise becomes empty. Every agreement becomes fragile. The prediction. Now we make a testable claim. This is the holophase method. We don't just describe, we predict. If our insight is correct, if a coherent reality has exactly one phi, then we should be able to predict something. Whenever we think we have found multiple phis, careful comparison will reveal there are actually different aspects of one structure, or they will contradict. Let's break this down. Scenario 1. There are aspects of one structure. Someone says, I have found two different comparability structures, one for color, one for sound. But look closer. Can these two structures be compared? Can you ask, does this color distinction correspond to that sound distinction? If yes, then you have a meta-comparability that encompasses both. A higher order phi that governs how the lower structures relate. They aren't two independent phis. They are two domains within one overarching comparability structure. Scenario 2. They contradict. Imagine two truly separate comparability structures that never interact. One says A is different from B. The other says A is identical to B. If they never meet, if no comparison is ever made between them, then you effectively have two separate realities. Not one coherent reality with two phis, two realities, each with its own phi. But if they exist in what we call one universe, eventually a comparison will be attempted. A system will try to use both structures simultaneously. And then, contradiction. Either the contradiction breaks the system, or a higher order comparability emerges to resolve it. The prediction is, we will never find two independent, non-contradictory, equally fundamental comparability structures within one coherent reality. They will always reduce to one, or they will conflict, or they will be domains within a larger one. The falsification. How could this be wrong? The falsification condition is clear. Demonstrate two clearly distinguishable, independent comparability structures that never interact or contradict within one coherent universe. They must be 1. Clearly distinguishable, not just two names for the same thing. 2. Independent, not derived from each other, not aspects of a higher structure. 3. Non-contradictory. They don't produce conflicting results when applied to the same situation. 4. Within one coherent universe, they both apply to what we consider a single reality. If someone can build such a system, a universe model with two fundamentally different, equally primitive comparability structures that work side by side without conflict, then part 24 fails. But notice the challenge. To demonstrate this to us, they would need to compare the two structures. They would need to show us how they are different, how they are independent. But that act of comparison would itself use comparability, a meta-phi that encompasses both. The moment they say, this structure works like this, and that structure works like that, they have used a higher order comparability to relate them. This doesn't make the falsification impossible. It shows how deep the claim goes. Phi isn't just in reality, it is what makes coherence possible. Multiple fundamental phis would mean multiple unrelatable realities, which is exactly what multiple universes theories suggest. Not one universe with multiple phis, but multiple universes, each with its own phi. The ethical firewall. Now I want to connect this to where we've been, because this isn't just abstract philosophy. Part 20 taught us objectivity is shared comparability. Part 21 taught us truth is what survives comparison. Part 22 taught us comparability demands responsibility. Part 23 taught us without phi, no world. Now part 24 completes the circle. Without one phi, no coherent world. Why does this matter ethically? Because people sometimes use the language of multiple realities as an escape hatch, as a way to avoid being checked, to avoid correction. They say, in your reality, my claim is false, but in my reality, it's true. That sounds sophisticated, but often it's just a way to refuse the public layer, to refuse shared accountability. Part 24 is a firewall against that escape. It says, if you and I are in the same world, if our actions collide, if our consequences mix, then there is one comparability structure binding us. We can argue, we can interpret, we can disagree, but we cannot declare ourselves incomparable while still affecting one another. If we affect one another, we are already in one shared comparability arena. That arena is phi. This is not about forcing agreement. It's about preventing the collapse of the very ground that makes disagreement meaningful. Disagreement presupposes a shared what we're disagreeing about. Conflict presupposes a shared battlefield. Even misunderstanding presupposes something being misunderstood. All of these require one phi. The objection. But people disagree. I can hear the objection forming. You might be thinking, but people disagree all the time. Cultures have completely different values. Scientists have competing models. How can you say there's one phi when the world looks so divided? This is important. Let's address it directly. Diversity is real. Different perspectives are real. Multiple models of the same phenomenon are not just possible, they're inevitable for finite minds in an infinite world. But here's the crucial distinction. Multiple perspectives are not multiple phis. Think of the mountain again. One person calls it Koi Baba, another calls it Father Mountain, a third draws it. Different encodings, same mountain. They can meet at the base and point to the same peak. That shared pointing means one world. Not one word, one world. Or think of a forest. A biologist sees ecosystems. A logger sees timber. A poet sees mystery. Different perspectives, same forest. They can all walk through the same trees, feel the same rain, get lost in the same paths. The forest doesn't split because their descriptions differ. The descriptions are about the same forest. Phi is not the descriptions. Phi is what makes it possible for different descriptions to be about the same thing. Different perspectives are like different maps of the same territory. Multiple phis would be like having two different territories occupying the same space, which is either contradiction or confusion. So when we say one phi, we're not saying everyone will agree. We're saying disagreement is only meaningful inside a shared comparability. To disagree, you must disagree about something, and that aboutness requires phi. The single rule of the game. Consider chess. Chess has one set of rules. One way to distinguish legal moves from illegal ones. One comparability structure for this move is allowed, that move is not. People play chess all over the world. In parks, in tournaments, online. Are there multiple rule sets? Multiple ways to determine what checkmate means? No. There is one rule set. Many games. If someone in Tokyo says the bishop moves diagonally, and someone in Paris says the bishop moves in straight lines, they're not playing different versions of chess. They're playing different games. For it to be chess at all, the comparability structure, the rules, must be one. Not one physical book, one logical structure. This is crucial. The rules of chess exist even if no one is playing. They are a set of permissions and constraints, a way to distinguish valid from invalid. That's phi-like. And for chess to be coherent, that rule set must be self-consistent. Not multiple contradictory rule sets coexisting. One. The mathematical truth that is one. Now consider mathematics. 2 plus 2 equals 4. This is true in America, true in China, true on Mars, true in any possible universe where 2, plus, and 4 have their standard meanings. Is there an American 2 plus 2 equals 4 and a Chinese 2 plus 2 equals 4? No. There is one truth, many minds recognizing it. The comparability structure here is the logical structure of arithmetic, the permission to distinguish true statements from false ones. That structure is singular. If it weren't, mathematics would fracture into countless private mathematics. 2 plus 2 equals 4 for me, 2 plus 2 equals 5 for you, would both be true in their own way. But that's not mathematics. That's confusion. Mathematics works because its comparability structure is shared, consistent, and one. The physics of one measurement. Even in physics, the principle holds. All measurement is comparison. This ruler against that length, this clock against that duration, this scale against that mass. For physics to be consistent, these comparisons must be relatable. The comparison of lengths must relate to the comparison of times, must relate to the comparison of masses. Otherwise, you don't have physics. You have separate, unrelated measurement domains. The theory of relativity didn't discover different comparabilities for different observers. It discovered how one comparability structure appears from different perspectives. The speed of light is constant not because everyone has their own private phi, but because there is one phi that gives the same result when properly compared. Physics seeks invariants, things that don't change under comparison. Those invariants are evidence of a single, consistent comparability structure underlying all phenomena. The weaving loom's single permission. Let me return to the factory floor with this lens. In the weaving factory, there seem to be many comparabilities. The comparability of colors, red versus blue. The comparability of textures, coarse versus fine. The comparability of patterns, Herati versus Bukhara. The comparability of quality, good nut versus bad nut. But were these separate phis, or were they all expressions of one permission to distinguish? Look closer. To decide if a nut was good, you needed to compare it to the pattern. But to read the pattern, you needed to distinguish its lines and colors. And to distinguish colors, you needed the basic permission of this color, not that color. They nested. They built on each other. But at the bottom, one simple capacity, to tell this from that. Not a different capacity for colors, another for textures, another for patterns. One capacity applied to different domains. The master weaver didn't have a color phi in his left eye and a texture phi in his right hand. He had one mindful attention that could distinguish colors, then textures, then patterns, then qualities. The phi was singular. The applications were many. Scope and limits. Let me be precise about what this part does not claim. Part 24 does not claim that there is only one culture, only one language, only one worldview, only one model, only one moral code, only one measurement tool. All of those can be many, richly, beautifully many. But they must be mutually translatable in principle if they refer to the same world. If not, they do not refer to the same coherent reality. They refer to different games, or different stories, or different unlicensed claims. So the scope is foundational comparability, not surface diversity. And the limits? We are still in undifferentiated phi. We have not yet allowed the first public readable change. We are not yet talking about how phi differentiates into space, time, matter, energy. We are earning the permission layer. And the permission we're earning today is uniqueness. The listener carry. I want to give you one sentence to carry out of this part. A sentence small enough to hold, strong enough to use. Here it is. One coherent world, one comparability structure. Hold that. When you encounter theories that suggest multiple fundamental realities, multiple truths, multiple logics coexisting in one universe, ask, how are they compared? What metastructure relates them? If there is no metastructure, they aren't one universe. If there is a metastructure, then that is the one phi. And when you hear someone use "in my reality" as a shield against checking, against correction, against accountability, remember, if your actions affect my world, we share one phi. We may see it differently, we may describe it differently, but the ground of our disagreement is singular. That's not a constraint. It's what makes disagreement meaningful instead of just noisy. The bridge forward. We have reached another boundary. We have seen that phi is not only necessary for any reality, but that for a reality to be coherent, phi must be singular. Not many grounds, one ground. But now a new question arises, one that has tempted philosophers for millennia. If phi is so fundamental, so necessary, so singular, does it have a purpose? Does it aim towards something? Is it trying to accomplish anything? That is where we go next, to the teleology, or rather the non-teleology of phi. But that is for part 25. For now, sit with this. The universe you inhabit, with all its diversity, all its colors, sounds, thoughts, and laws, rests on a single, silent permission. One capacity for distinction, one comparability structure, many expressions, one source. The loom has many threads, but only one principle of weaving. The world has many descriptions, but only one ground of readability. Always peace be upon you.